Section 17 of The Story of the Trapper by Agnes Christina Laut. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Leinhart. Chapter 17. The Rare Furs. How the Trapper Takes Sac-Wassu the Mink, Nekik the Otter, Wuchak the Fisher, and Wapistan the Marten. 1. Sac-Wassu the Mink. There are other little chaps with more valuable fur than musquash, whose skin seldom attains higher honor than inside linings, and wabus, whose snowy coat is put to the indignity of imitating ermine with a dotting of black cat for the ermine's jet tip. There are mink and otter and fisher and fox and ermine and sable, all little fellows with pelts worth their weight in coin of the realm. On one of those idle days when the trapper seems to be doing nothing but lying on his back in the sun, he has witnessed a curious but common battle in pantomime between bird and beast. A prairie hawk circles and drops, lifts and wheels again with monotonous silent persistence above the swamp. What quarry does he seek, this lawless forager of the upper airs, still hunting a hidden nook of the low prairie? If he were out purely for exercise, like the little badger when it goes rubbing the back of its head from post to post, there would be a buzzing of wings and shrill, lonely callings to an unseen mate. But the circling hawk is as silent as the very personification of death. Apparently he can't make up his mind for the death drop on some rat or frog down there in the swamp. The trapper notices that the hawk keeps circling directly above the place where the waters of the swamp tumble from the ravine in a small cataract to join a lower river. He knows, too, from the rich orange of the plumage, that the hawk is young. An older fellow would not be advertising his intentions in this fashion. Besides, an older hawk would have russet gray feathering. Is the rascally young hawk meditating a clutch of talons round some of the unsuspecting trout that usually frequent the quiet pools below a waterfall? Or does he aim at bigger game? A young hawk is bold with a courage that has not yet learned the wisdom of caution. That is why there are so many more of the brilliant young red hawks in our museums than old grizzled gray veterans whose craft circumvents the specimen hunter's cunning. Now the trapper comes to have as keen a sense of feel for all the creatures of the wilds as the creatures of the wilds have for man, so he shifts his position that he may find what is attracting the hawk. Down on the pebbled beach below the waterfalls lies an auburn bundle of fur, about the size of a very long, slim, short-legged cat, still as a stone, some member of the weasel family, gorged torpid with fish, stretched out full length to sleep in the sun. To sleep, ah yes, and as the Danish prince said, perchance to dream, for all the little fellows of river and prairie take good care never to sleep where they are exposed to their countless enemies. This sleep of the weasel arouses the man's suspicion. The trapper draws out his field glass. The sleeper is a mink, and its sleep is a sham, with beady red eyes blinking a deal too lively for real death. Why does it lie on its back, rigid and straight, as if it were dead, with all four tiny paws clutched out stiff? The trapper scans the surface of the swamp to see if some foolish muskrat is swimming dangerously near the sleeping mink. Presently the hawk circles lower, lower, drops straight as a stone. Its talons are almost in the mink's body, when of a sudden the sleeper awakens with a leap of the four stiff little feet and a darting spear thrust of snapping teeth deep in the neck of the hawk. At first the hawk rises, tearing furiously at the clinging mink with its claws. The wings sag. Down bird and beast fall. Over they roll on the sandy beach, hawk and mink, over and over with a thrashing of the hawk's wings to beat the treacherous little vampire off. Now the bloodsucker is on top, clutching, clutching. Now the bird flounders up, craning his neck from the death grip. Then the hawk falls on his back. His wings are prone. They cease to flutter. Running to the bank, the trapper is surprised to see the little bloodsucker making off with the prey instead of deserting it as all creatures akin to the weasel family usually do. That means a family of mink somewhere near, to be given their first lesson in bird hunting, in mink hawking by the body of this poor, dead, foolish gyr-falcon. By a red mark here, by a feather there, crushed grass as if something dragged, a little webbed footprint on the wet clay, a tiny marking of double dots where the feet have crossed a dry stone, the trapper slowly takes up the trail of the mink. Mink are not prime till the late fall. Then the reddish fur assumes the shades of the russet grasses where they run until the white of winter covers the land. Then, as if nature were to exact avengement for all the red slaughter the mink has wrought during the rest of the year, his coat becomes dark brown, almost black, the very shade that renders him most conspicuous above snow to all the enemies of the mink world. But while the trapper has no intention of destroying what would be worthless now, but will be valuable in the winter, it is not every day that even a trapper has a chance to trail a mink back to its nest and see the young family. But suddenly the trail stops. Here is a sandy patch with some tumbled stones under a tangle of grasses and a rivulet not a foot away. Ah, there it is, a nest or lair, a tiny hole almost hidden by the rushes. But the nest seems empty. Fast as the trapper has come, the mink came faster and hid her family. To one side, the hawk had been dropped among the rushes. The man pokes a stick in the lair, but finds nothing. Putting in his hand, he is dragging out bones, feathers, skeleton muskrats, putrid frogs, promiscuous remnants of other quarries brought to the burrow by the mink, when a little caddish spit almost touches his hand. His palm closes over something warm, squirming, smaller than a kitten with very downy fur, on a soft, mouse-like skin, eyes that are still blind, and a tiny mouth that neither meows nor squeaks, just spits, 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 in impotent viperish fury. All the other minklets the mother had succeeded in hiding under the grasses, but somehow this one had been left. Will he take it home and try the experiment of rearing a young mink with a family of kittens? The trapper calls to mind other experiments. There was the little beaver that chewed up his canoe and gnawed a hole of escape through the door. There were the 3 little bobcats left in the woods behind his cabin last year when he refrained from setting out traps and tied up his dog to see if he could not catch the whole family, mother and kittens, for an Eastern museum. Furtively at first, the mother had come to feed her kittens. Then the man had put out rugs to keep the kittens warm and lain in wait for the mother. But no sooner did she see her offspring comfortably cared for than she deserted them entirely, evidently acting on the proverb that the most gracious enemy is the most dangerous, or else deciding that the kits were so well off that she was not needed. Adopting the 3 little wildcats, the trapper had reared them past blind eyes, past colic and dumps, and all the youthful ills to which live kittens are heirs, when trouble began. The longing for the wilds came. Even catnip green and senna tea boiled can't cure that. So keenly did the gypsy longing come to one little Bob that he perished escaping to the woods by way of the chimney flue. The second little Bob succeeded in escaping through a parchment stopgap that served the trapper as a window, and the third Bobby dealt such an ill-tempered gash to the dog's nose that the combat ended in instant death for the cat. Thinking over these experiments, the trapper wisely puts the mink back in the nest with words which it would have been well for that little ball of down to have understood. He told it he would come back for it next winter, and to be sure to have its best black coat on. For the little first-year minks wear dark coats, almost as fine as Russian sable. Yes, he reflects, poking it back to the hole and retreating quickly so that the mother will return, Better leave it till the winter, for wasn't it Coot who put a mink among his kittens, only to have the little viper set on them with tooth and claw as soon as its eyes opened? Also, mink are bad neighbors to a poultry yard. 40 chickens in a single night will the little mink destroy, not for food, but, to quote man's words, for the zest of the sport. The mink, you must remember, like other pot hunters, can boast of a big bag. The trapper did come back next fall. It was when he was ranging all the swamplands for beaver dams. Swamplands often mean beaver dams, and trappers always note what stops the current of a sluggish stream. Frequently it is a beaver colony built across a valley in the mountains, or stopping up the outlet of a slough. The trapper was sleeping under his canoe on the banks of the river where the swamp tumbled out from the ravine. Before retiring to what was a boat by day and a bed by night, he had set out a fish net and some loose lines, which the flow of the current would keep in motion below the waterfall. Carelessly, next day, he threw the fish heads among the stones. The second morning he found such a multitude of little tracks dotting the rime of the hoarfrost that he erected a tent back from the waterfalls and decided to stay trapping there till the winter. The fish heads were no longer thrown away. They were left among the stones in small steel traps weighted with other stones, or attached to a loose stick that would impede flight. And if the poor gyrfalcon could have seen the mink held by the jaws of a steel trap, hissing, snarling, breaking its teeth on the iron, spitting out all the rage of its wicked nature, the bird would have been avenged. And as winter deepened, the quality of minks taken from the traps became darker, silkier, crisper, almost brown-black in some of the young, but for light fur on the under lip. The Indians say that Sakwasaw, the mink, would sell his family for a fish, and as long as fish lay among the stones, the trapper gathered his harvest of fur, reddish mink that would be made into little neck ruffs and collar pieces, reddish-brown mink that would be sewed into costly coats and cloaks, rare brownish-black mink that would be put into the beautiful flat scarf collars almost as costly as a full coat. And so the mink hunt went on merrily for the man till the midwinter lull came at Christmas. For that year the mink hunt was over. 2. Nekik the otter. Sakwasu was not the only fisher at the pool below the falls. On one of those idle days when the trappers sat lazily by the riverside, a round head, slightly sunburned from black to russet, had hobbled up to the surface of the water, peered sharply at the man sitting so still, paddled little flipper-like feet about, then ducked down again. Motionless as the mossed log under him sits the man, and in a moment up comes the little black head again, round as a golf ball, about the size of a very large cat, followed by 3 other little bobbing heads, a mother otter teaching her babies to dive and swim and duck from the river surface to the burrows below the water along the river bank. Perhaps the trapper has found a dead fish along this very bank with only the choice portions of the body eaten, a sure sign that Nekik the otter, the little epicure of the water world, has been fishing at this river. With a scarcely perceptible motion, the man turns his head to watch the swimmers. Instantly, down they plunge, mother and babies, to come to the surface again higher upstream, evidently working up current like the beaver in spring for a glorious frolic in the cold, clear waters of the upper sources. At one place on the sandy beach, they all wade ashore. The man utters a slight hiss. Away they scamper, the foolish youngsters, landward instead of to the safe water as the hesitating mother would have them do, all the little feet scrambling over the sand with the funny short steps of a Chinese lady in tight boots. Maternal care proves stronger than fear. The frightened mother follows the young otter and will no doubt read them a sound lecture on land dangers when she has rounded them back to the safe water higher upstream. Of all wild creatures, none is so crafty in concealing its lairs as the otter. Where did this family come from? They had not been swimming upstream, for the man had been watching on the riverbank long before they appeared on the surface. Stripping, the trapper dives in midstream, then half wades, half swims along the steepest bank, running his arm against the clay cliff to find a burrow. On land, he could not do this at the lair of the otter, for the smell of the man-touch would be left on his trail, and the otter, keener of scent and fear than the mink, would take alarm. But for the same reason that the river is the safest refuge for the otter, it is the surest hunting for the man. Water does not keep the scent of a trail. So the man runs his arm along the bank. The river is the surest hunting for the man, but not the safest. If an old male were in the bank burrow now, or happened to be emerging from grass-lined subterranean air chambers above the bank gallery, it might be serious enough for the exploring trapper. One bite of Nekik the otter has crippled many an Indian. Knowing from the remnants of half-eaten fish and from the holes in the bank that he has found an otter runway, the man goes home as well satisfied as if he had done a good day's work. And so that winter, when he had camped below the swamp for the mink hunt, the trapper was not surprised one morning to find a half-eaten fish on the riverbank. Sakwasu the mink takes good care to leave no remnants of his greedy meal. What he cannot eat, he caches. Even if he has strangled a dozen water rats in one hunt, they will be dragged in a heap and covered. The half-eaten fish left exposed is not mink's work. Otter has been here, and otter will come back, for as the frost hardens, only those pools below the falls keep free from ice. No use setting traps with fish heads as long as fresh fish are to be had for the taking. Besides, the man has done nothing to conceal his tracks, and each morning the half-eaten fish lie farther off the line of the man trail. By and by, the man notices that no more half-eaten fish are on his side of the river. Little tracks of webbed feet furrowing a deep rut in the soft snow of the frozen river tell that Nekik has taken alarm and is fishing from the other side. And when Christmas comes, with a dwindling of the mink hunt, the man, too, crosses to the other side. Here he finds that the otter tracks have worn a path that is almost a toboggan slide down the crusted snowbank to the iced edge of the pool. By this time, Nekik's pelt is prime, almost black, and as glossy as floss. By this time, too, the fish are scarce, and the epicure has become ravenous as a pauper. One night when the trapper was reconnoitering the fish hole, he had approached the snowbank so noiselessly that he came on a whole colony of otters without their knowledge of his presence. Down the snowbank they tumbled, head first, tail first, slithering through the snow with their little paws braced, rolling down on their backs like lads upset from a toboggan, otter after otter, till the man learned that the little beasts were not fishing at all, but coasting the snowbank like youngsters on a night frolic. No sooner did one reach the bottom than up he scampered to repeat the fun, and sometimes 2 or 3 went down in a rolling bunch, mixed up at the foot of a slide as badly as a couple of toboggans that were unpremeditatedly changing their occupants. Bears wrestle. The kittens of all the cat tribe play hide-and-seek. Little Badger finds it fun to run round, rubbing the back of his head on things. And here was Nekik the otter at the favorite amusement of his kind, coasting down a snowbank. If the trapper were an Indian, he would lie in wait at the landing place and spear the otter as they came from the water. But the white man's craft is deeper. He does not wish to frighten the otter till the last have been taken. Coming to the slide by day, he baits a steel trap with fish and buries it in the snow just where the otter will be coming down the hill or up from the pool. Perhaps he places a dozen such traps around the hole with nothing visible but the frozen fish lying on the surface. If he sets his traps during a snowfall, so much the better. His own tracks will be obliterated, and the otter's nose will discover the fish. Then he takes a bag filled with some substance of animal odor, pomatum, fresh meat, pork, or he may use the flesh side of a fresh deer hide. This he drags over the snow where he has stepped. He may even use a fresh hide to handle the traps, as a waiter uses a serviette to pass plates. There must be no man smell, no man track near the otter traps. While the mink hunt is fairly over by midwinter, otter trapping lasts from October to May. The value of all rare furs, mink, otter, marten, ermine, varies with two things. 1, the latitude of the hunting field. 2, the season of the hunt. For instance, ask a trapper of Minnesota or Lake Superior what he thinks of the ermine, and he will tell you that it is a miserable sort of weasel of a dirty drab brown, not worth 25 cents a skin. Ask a trapper of the North Saskatchewan what he thinks of ermine, and he will tell you it is a pretty little whitish creature, good for fur if trapped late enough in the winter and always useful as a lining. But ask a trapper of the Arctic about the ermine, and he describes it as the finest fur that is taken except the silver fox, white and soft as swan's down, with a tail tip like black onyx. This difference in the fur of the animal explains the wide variety of prices paid. Ermine not worth 25 cents in Wisconsin might be worth 10 times as much on the Saskatchewan. So it is with the otter. All trapped between latitude 35 and 60 is good fur, and the best is that taken toward the end of winter, when scarcely a russet hair should be found in the long overfur of Neckik's coat. 3. Wuchak the fisher, or pecan. Wherever the waste of fish or deer is thrown, there will be found lines of double tracks, not so large as the wildcats, not so small as the otters, and without the same webbing as the minks. This is Wuchak the fisher, or pecan, commonly called the black cat, who in spite of his fishy name hates water as cats hate it, and the tracks are double because pecan travel in pairs. He is found along the banks of streams because he preys on fish and fisher, on mink and otter and muskrat, on frogs and birds and creatures that come to drink. He is, after all, a very greedy fellow, not at all particular about his diet, and like all gluttons, easily snared. While mink and otter are about, the trapper will waste no steel traps on pecan. A deadfall will act just as effectively, but there is one point requiring care. Pecan has a sharp nose. It is his nose that brings him to all carrion just as surely as hawks come to pick dead bones. But that same nose will tell him of man's presence. So when the trapper has built his pen of logs so that the front log, or deadfall, will crush down on the back of an intruder tugging at the bait inside, he overlays all with leaves and brush to quiet the pecan's suspicions. Besides, the pecan has many tricks akin to the wolverine. He is an inveterate thief. There is a well-known instance of Hudson's Bay trappers having a line of 150 marten traps stretching for 50 miles, robbed of their bait by pecan. The men shortened the line to 30 miles, and for 6 times in succession did pecan destroy the traps. Then the men set themselves to trap the robber. He will rifle a deadfall from the slanting back roof where there is no danger, so the trapper overlays the back with heavy brush. Pecan do not yield a rare fur, but they are always at run where the trapper is hunting the rare furs, and for that reason are usually snared at the same time as mink and otter. 4. Wapistan the marten. When Coot went blind on his way home from the rabbit hunt, he had intended to set out for the pine woods. Though blizzards still howl over the prairie, by March the warm sun of midday has set the sap of the forests stirring, and all the woodland life awakens from its long winter sleep. Cougar and lynx and bear rove through the forest, ravenous with spring hunger. Otter, too, may be found where the ice mounds of a waterfall are beginning to thaw, but it is not any of these that the trapper seeks. If they cross his path, good, they too will swell his account at the fur post. It is another of the little chaps that he seeks, a little, long, low-set animal whose fur is now glistening bright on the deep, dark overhairs, soft as down in the thick fawn underhairs, Wapistan the marten. When the forest begins to stir with the coming of spring, Wapistan stirs too, crawling out from the hollow of some rotten pine log, restless with the same bloodthirst that set the little mink playing his tricks on the hawk. And yet the marten is not such a little viper as the mink. Wapistan will eat leaves and nuts and roots if he can get vegetable food, but failing these, that ravenous spring hunger of his must be appeased with something else. And out he goes from his log hole, hunger bold as the biggest of all other spring ravagers. That boldness gives the trapper his chance at the very time when Wapistan's fur is best. All winter the trapper may have taken marten, but the end of winter is the time when Wapistan wanders freely from cover. Thus the trapper's calendar would have months of muskrat first, then beaver and mink and pecan and bear and fox and ermine and rabbit and lynx and marten, with a long, idle midsummer space when he goes to the fort for the year's provisions and gathers the lore of his craft. Wapistan is not hard to track. Being much longer and heavier than a cat, with very short legs and small feet, his body almost drags the ground, and his tracks sink deep, clear, and sharp. His feet are smaller than otters and minks, but easily distinguishable from those two fishers. The water animal leaves a spreading footprint, the mark of the webbed toes, without any fur on the padding of the toe balls. The land animal of the same size has clear-cut, narrower, heavier marks. By March, these dotting foot tracks thread the snow everywhere. Coming on marten tracks at a pine log, the trapper sends in his dog or prods with a stick. Finding nothing, he baits a steel trap with pomatum, covers it deftly with snow, drags the decoy skin about to conceal his own tracks, and goes away in the hope that the marten will come back to this log to guzzle on his prey and sleep. If the track is much frequented, or the forest overrun with marten tracks, the trapper builds deadfalls, many of them running from tree to tree for miles through the forest in a circle whose circuit brings him back to his cabin. Remnants of these log traps may be seen through all parts of the Rocky Mountain forests. 30 to 40 traps are considered a day's work for one man, 6 or 10 marten, all that he expects to take in one round. But when marten are plentiful, the unused traps of today may bring a prize tomorrow. The Indian trapper would use still another kind of trap. Where the tracks are plainly frequently used runways to watering places or lair and hollow tree, the Indian digs a pit across the marten's trail. On this he spreads brush in such roof fashion that though the marten is a good climber, if once he falls in, it is almost impossible for him to scramble out. If a poor cackling grouse or fool hen be thrust into the pit, the Indian is almost sure to find a prisoner. This seems to the white man a barbarous kind of trapping, but the poor fool hen, haunted by all the creatures of the forest, never seems to learn wisdom, but invites disaster by popping out of the brush to stare at every living thing that passes. If she did not fall a victim in the pit, she certainly would to her own curiosity above ground. To the steel trap the hunter attaches a piece of log to entangle the prisoner's flight as he rushes through the underbrush. Once caught in the steel jaws, little Wapistan must wait. Wait for what? For the same thing that comes to the poor fool hen when Wapistan goes crashing through the brush after her. For the same thing that comes to the baby squirrels when Wapistan climbs a tree to rob the squirrel's nest, eat the young, and live in the rifled house. For the same thing that comes to the hoary marmot whistling his spring tune just outside his rocky den when Wapistan, who has climbed up, pounces down from above. Little death dealer he has been all his life, and now death comes to him for a nobler cause than the stuffing of a greedy maw, for the clothing of a creature nobler than himself, man. The otter can protect himself by diving, even diving under snow. The mink has craft to hide himself under leaves so that the sharpest eyes cannot detect him. Both mink and otter furs have very little of that animal smell which enables the foragers to follow their trail. What gift has Wapistan, the marten, to protect himself against all the powers that prey? His strength and his wisdom lie in the little stubby feet. These can climb. A trapper's dog had stumbled on a marten in a stump hole. A snap of the marten's teeth sent the dog back with a jump. Wapistan will hang on to the nose of a dog to the death, and trappers' dogs grow cautious. Before the dog gathered courage to make another rush, the marten escaped by a rear knothole, getting the start of his enemy by 50 yards. Off they raced, the dog spending himself in fury, the marten keeping under the thorny brush where his enemy could not follow, then across open snow where the dog gained, then into the pine woods where the trail ended on the snow. Where had the fugitive gone? When the man came up, he first searched for log holes. There were none. Then he lifted some of the rocks. There was no trace of Wapistan. But the dog kept baying a special tree, a blasted trunk, bare as a mast pole and seemingly impossible for any animal but a squirrel to climb. Knowing the trick by which creatures like the bobcat can flatten their body into a resemblance of a tree trunk, the trapper searched carefully all round the bare trunk. It was not till many months afterward, when a windstorm had broken the tree, that he discovered the upper part had been hollow. Into this eerie nook the pursued marten had scrambled and waited in safety till dog and man retired. In one of his traps, the man finds a peculiarly short specimen of the marten. In the vernacular of the craft, this marten's bushy tail will not reach as far back as his hind legs can stretch. Widely different from the mink's scarcely visible ears, this fellow's ears are sharply upright, keenly alert. He is like a fox, where the mink resembles a furred serpent. Marten moves, springs, jumps like an animal. Mink glides like a snake. Marten has the strong neck of an animal fighter. Mink has the long, thin, twisting neck which reptiles need to give them striking power for their fangs. Mink's upper lip has a mere rim of white or yellow. Marten's breast is patched sulfur. But this short marten with a tail shorter than other marten differs from his kind as to fur. Both mink and marten fur are reddish-brown, but this short marten's fur is almost black, of great depth, of great thickness, and of three qualities. 1, there are the long, dark overhairs, the same as the ordinary marten, only darker, thicker, deeper. 2, there is the soft underfur of the ordinary marten, usually fawn, and this fellow deep brown. 3, there is the skin fur resembling chicken down, of which this little marten has such a wealth. To use a technical expression, you cannot find his scalp. Without going into the old quarrel about species, when a marten has these peculiarities, he is known to the trapper as sable. Whether he is the American counterpart to the Russian sable is a disputed point. Whether his superior qualities are owing to age, climate, species, it is enough for the trapper to know that short, dark marten yields the trade sable. End of section 17.